Comrade Moobot has invaded the chat. And Moobot has invaded the chat. And Moobot.
Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check. Okay. I'm back. How do you like this color grading? What? Session expired? Come on, Crunchyroll. Anyway, I'll deal with that later. Okay. So what did I do? Let me show you what I did. Here is the SL-DZ1200. I hope you guys can hear that. What I figured out today, let me take this out for the moment.
Doctor Game.
Operation That Wacky Doctor Game. What? You mean the hole here in the middle? So, those who may have seen this before may or may not remember that it was not previously possible for me to...
Said gotta be careful and not touch the tweezer to the edge laughing face.
Yes. It was not possible for me to just take the slip disc off of the platter like this without disassembling the whole spindle assembly. And what I did is there's a set of clips that sandwich together the platter, right? And for the platter, I will call the platter the heavy aluminum spinny thing. This is where this is the platter. I'll say this is the rotating platter. And this is the equivalent of the vinyl and the slip disc. And I cleaned this up, and there's this like tape on this, which seems to be like something very slippery, like Teflon on one side and glue on the other side, and a similar thing by default down here. And so this forms a very slippery surface when it's clean. It was, at first when I cleaned it up, I thought, hey, it's super slippery, great. But that turns out to be, I think, a weakness. It's too slippery. It's slipperier than real turntables. I think I mentioned to you previously, like I went to Guitar Center to try it, and this is slipperier than that. And the slipperiness is a problem because if I'm scratching and I'm holding down the platter, holding down the slip disc, the platter is spinning, when I let go, because there's so little friction, it takes a while before the slip disc interlocks. And I also don't get a lot of feedback. So if I try to push it Actually, I didn't know that this was possible, but I'm kind of recapping now. It was hard for me when I push it to know when I've kind of matched the speed, because I can push it a little bit, and people who use turntables always laugh at people who are going from controllers to turntables. And the guy's like, when I let go, it just doesn't snap up to speed. Am I supposed to push it? And the turntable is like, yes, you're supposed to push it. But I'm not sure how, it's hard for me to feel exactly how much, because of course I push it too much, then like the sound will go louder. And so what I did is I removed the clips here that hold the slip assembly onto the platter. And that lets me take off the slip assembly just by taking off the sensor here, rather than disassembling the whole spindle. And then with access to this surface, I tried putting various things on here, like sticky lubricant and stuff, to try to increase the amount of friction. And in the end, what I did is I went to Michael's and I bought some felt, because felt is what real slip mats are made out of. And I measured this and I laser cut a piece of felt down to dimension, and stuck this down here. And that felt, then I taped the felt down to the lower materials. That would increase the friction so that it would just be a felt on Teflon. I don't know for sure this is Teflon, right? But felt on Teflon-ish contact, rather than having another moving layer of this Teflon-ish stuff underneath. And this would also, I think, more closely emulate a real turntable stack, where there's like the metal platter, and then there's sometimes a rubbery mat on top, and then a slip mat on top of that, and then this, and then the vinyl, and that, of course, lifts the whole assembly a little bit. And in particular, there's, I don't know how easily you can see this, but essentially you'll see that there's some plastic on the outside. Plastic on the outside is just to mechanically position it. And there's plastic on the inside. The plastic on the inside has the markings that the encoder reads. And so since I'm lifting the assembly by a little bit, I created a little washer, also laser cut out of the same felt. And so that'll lift the sensor, this thing here, by that exact same amount. Yeah.
That it doesn't burn up.
You just have to go fast enough, not too much power, and you want it to burn a little bit, because you don't want the edge to fray. And so I looked up, and most types of felt, actually all known types of felt, can be laser cut. There apparently are 3 main types of felt: wool felt, acrylic felt, and PET felt, polyethylene felt. What cannot be laser cut is anything that has halogens in it. So fluorinated felt, you can't laser cut. I've never heard of such a thing. And for certain exotic uses, there are PVC felt pellets, which you also cannot laser cut because they got chlorine in it. But those are exotic. So apparently pretty much any felt that you can get a hold of that looks like a felt sheet can be cut. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And so I made this, I cut the slip ring here, and then, and then I have the little standoff here. Let me put this back together again. And now what I'm doing is I'm leaving that centerpiece off and leaving the spindle kind of exposed, because it's just way easier for me to get at the mechanisms that I want, at the mechanical mechanisms, without having to disassemble the center spindle. All right. The design is interesting because there's electronics in the base. And of course the top platter is moving, and then there's this display, right, that sits here in the middle. So what there is all bearings, right, have a hole in the middle, and so they wind these through those holes. But that just means removing this thing involves getting these connectors like through this tiny hole. Kind of annoying. I don't want to break any of these cables. So I figured out that by just removing those retaining clips, I can get access to the mechanical mechanism without having to remove the rest of this. The only downside is with no retaining clips, bad things will happen. I'll probably damage or destroy either the encoded plastic strip that it reads, or damage the sensor if I turn the unit upside down. I'm not likely to do that accidentally, so I don't feel too scared about that. Let me get this back in. And then it's not going to look any different, but it feels different. The increased amount of friction by having this felt on plastic. Yes, less slippery. Felt on plastic rather than plastic on plastic is less slippery and more like the turntable that I went to try out at Guitar Center compared to what I had before. Okay, so now that's in. Okay, this is a little weird. Let me put this back on. There we go.
970. Said, oh man, wish I could have tried it at max slip.
Well, it's easy for me to reverse this out, but this is way better. So by looking at the dots, first is there's definitely more friction, because previously when I hold the slip stationary, it would not affect the speed of the platter at all. And that means that basically the middle dot off the strobe would be stationary, and that means that you're at 0. Now when I'm holding it steady, the dot is moving slightly backwards by a small amount, maybe like 2%. It's slowed down kind of imperceptibly. That the slow march is somewhere around 2%, but it's definitely more friction. And so if I start, so the sample is set so that it's at the start here, at the second fort, right? So if I let go, you can still hear that there's a short rev up. And the rev up lasts, if I rewind back to about here, then it has enough time to get up to speed. And then I can push it. And you don't hear the rev up because I'm pushing it in. And it's much easier with more friction for me to feel when I'm pushing forward that I've matched the disc to the speed of the platter. And I'm not pushing faster or slower. Right? Because if I push too fast, right, you hear that she's too fast at the beginning before she comes back to normal sound. Right, that's pushing too hard.
70. Set interesting.
Right, so that's pushing too hard. And then if I don't leave it enough time to get up to speed, right, then it goes, whoa. But if I get it just right,
Dark Hunter 970. Said so forwards on these things are a little different then.
yeah. And it is
Said, are you outputting sound to speakers or only headphones?
only to headphones. That way I don't get Mike. Are you guys hearing it? You should be hearing it.
C. Said no.
Oh, you're not hearing.
Metro C. Said I think noise cancellation is taking it out.
No. There's a separate B2 to B2. What happened here? This is the same setup we had for the show. X2. Let me play a track. Because I'm not playing out speakers because I don't want them to come through. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the routing's messed up.
Fine. Well, the chat bot anyways.
Yeah, because your audio is coming through my mic, but the deck audio is coming through my audio interface, which is showing up in my voice meter. But is not showing up. Oh, I know why, because it's muted here because I was using it on my mic for streaming. There we go. Because we did a show last week and I had this, and this was how I sent the mic remotely. All right, now you guys can hear.
Dark Hunter 970. Said music.
All right, so I can do the demo again, right? So if I give it plenty of time to rev up, that's how the normal beginning of the sample is. And if I don't give it enough time to rev up, right, if I hit the sample too slow, then you'll hear it rev up.
And it becomes one instead of AAA.
Right. And if I push forward and I push it too fast,
Dark Hunter 970. Said that's pretty cool.
it goes, ah. Like, if I push too hard. And then if I push it just right, then in a shorter distance, so to do fast forwards, I have to be pushing it forward. Otherwise, I don't have enough time to let it get up to speed. And the big difference between having the felt slip mat in and when it was super slippery is it is much easier for me to feel when I'm pushing at exactly the right speed, right? Because pushing at the exactly right speed means I've pushed it up to match the platter below, right? The platter is down here is spinning, and I want to push it just enough so that the disc matches the platter. And so it is a little bit extra than on a controller just letting go, but it is not as hard as I thought it was going to be. Before I put the felt mat in, it was really hard. I thought that I just had to learn by pushing until I had muscle memory for how fast I needed to be going. But after I put the felt mat in, it's a lot easier.
Under 970. Setting stab scratches might be beneficial to them.
Yes, with the stab, it doesn't matter, right? Because with a stab, right, I wouldn't even need the motor running, right? Anything where the motor is not running and you're doing the scratch without the motor running, it wouldn't make any difference. This is mainly for forwards. But I'm suddenly a lot more interested in forwards because I was watching this presentation that Native Instruments France did with this melodic scratch artist in France. And she scratches over a lot of melodic samples using a lot of forwards, right? Because you don't want to play back the instruments and stuff distorted. You want to play back the instruments as is. And so she uses a lot of forwards to essentially play the sample like an instrument with melody. And that's just like extremely precise control with the forwards.
Said forwards are pretty useful and important. You can use it for stuff like drumming or double beat tricks.
Yeah. But this, I believe, is doable. This is not much harder than doing it on a controller. But I went back because I think when Zales first gave me this sample, what was I doing? On the controller, I was trying to see what happens if I do a transformer triplet on the first half of the sample. Transformer triplet on the first half, and then a triplet on the second half as like two different notes. And I just couldn't do it on the turntable with this because I could not manipulate the platter and get the first click from the transformer to sound normal. And sometimes even all three of them would sound distorted. But now with the felt mat in, I can feel how hard I need to push much more easily. It didn't take much practice, right? It took like a couple of minutes. So I don't think that it's actually substantially harder than a controller, but the configuration matters. When it was super slippery, I couldn't feel it. I couldn't tell when I pushed at the right amount. Now with the felt, it's pretty easy. It's not bulletproof like a controller is. A controller you just let go. But it's not that hard. And then, yeah. So it's also, this is somewhat easier to use also without the big things sticking out, because I can have some fingers and stuff in this spot, and I don't run into that control thing, and I don't really need to change tracks or anything. I figured out how to write these like wacky secure SD cards, and so that works. And I started practicing one-click and two-click flare orbits. The one-click especially, I love it. It's so efficient. You get so much sound or so many beats with so little motion.
Hunter 970 said pay the flare.
So this is the one-click. And I love this. I mean, I get 4 beats with only forward back and forward back. All right, so I get 1 rotation on each hand, and you're making full use of the ends and the change in direction. So each hand only does 2 motions, and you get 4 beats out of it. Or rather, I only need to close twice to get 4 beats out. I don't have to close 4 times like I would with a transformer. A transformer, I'd be on close. I have to open 4 times to get 4 beats. I only need to do 2.
Said I need to get faster at this scratch. Really nice to use.
Yeah. I think for me, especially, if any scratch is feasible for me to get faster, it's this one. It's like it's all coordination. I don't need a crazy muscle memory. And then the 2-click flare. The motion with the 2-click flare is a little bit requires more practice, more memory, because it's not completely symmetric, right? Because it's like close, click, open, close, click, open, close, click, open, close, click, open. But also not as hard as I thought it would be. All right, let's switch the sample up.
Hunter 970 said no. The boomerang is a step up from the 2-click. Safe fader movement record is a little different.
Ah, okay. That's the next thing.
Hunter 970 said no sort of same fader movement.
Mm. And then using the forward. This one requires even less. I don't even need to push forward. I only need to pull back.
Sharp 970. ZOOH, I have a combo for you again. Try and chirp flare.
Try a what? Chirp flare.
Sharp 970. Said it's a chirp followed by a one click.
Chirp followed by a one click. Okay. So one interesting thing when I was going back to the DDJ1000, because I like the way the DJ1000 crossfader feels compared to this one, and also right, it's like a real CDJ turntable. Is after spending a bunch of time on this, where you really want to touch very lightly, just barely enough for you to drag back. I don't push hard enough a lot on the DJ1000 to actuate the pressure-sensitive platter. That's something that never happened with the DJ RX. That's capacitive, right? Because you only need to barely touch it to make it move. But it was kind of interesting how the touch sensitivity of wanting to not push down just the minimum necessary for you to grab the platter makes kind of the lower end, quote unquote, capacitive jogs kind of more similar to manipulating the turntable platter.
Said kind of like a turntable.
Yeah.
And you need a lot of push down.
Yeah. Compared to the CDJ, where because the CDJ is mechanically actuated, especially when I'm changing direction, or when I'm grabbing the platter after the forward, I sometimes don't push down enough. And so there's momentum when my finger lands on it, and then when I pull back, it'll let go for a moment. It just, again, it's not a big deal, right? It's just, I remember I push down a little bit harder. It also doesn't require like crazy muscle memory or huge amounts of practice. It's a slight difference. But it is kind of interesting how the capacitive jog is kind of more similar to this with the turntable than the mechanical, than the CDJ mechanical jog. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. Yeah, the main thing I just wanted to document the felt adjustment, and like, yeah, what a big difference having a little bit of extra friction makes. I guess there is a reason why people use felt for slip mats. All right, thanks for tuning in.